Welcome to Wine Soundtrack USA. Listen to the passion with which producers narrate their winery and their world in 30 answers. Discover their stories, personalities, and passions.
Hello, friends and listeners of Wine Soundtrack. This is Allison Levine, and today I am sitting in Chalk Hill AVA at Chalk Hill Winery. Yes, they're the same name, and that is because it is a very special place in Sonoma, and we are with the winemaker, Darrel Holbrook, who is going to tell us all about it. So, Darrel, welcome to Wine Soundtrack. Tell us about Chalk Hill Winery.
All right, thank you for having me. A little bit about Chalk Hill Winery. So, I've been here since 1994. Worked with several different winemakers through here, but Chalk Hill Winery itself is located in Chalk Hill AVA. We have roughly 1,300 acres that is for Chalk Hill. There is about 400 or so acres planted to various different varietals. So we have about 13, 14 different varietals on a property, which is very nice, even though we're known for Chardonnay. But we have a wide array of varietals on the property, which is very nice to be able to play around with as a winemaker and kind of tinker with different blends and whatnot.
Mm-hmm. And when you say different varieties, okay, we're in Sonoma, so a lot of people think Pinot and Chard. You said you're known for your Chardonnay, but what other varieties do you have?
So beyond Chardonnay, on the whites, we have Sauvignon Blanc, Sauvignon Gris, which is a very nice wine to play around with. We have a little bit of Viognier, some Sauvignon Muscat. We've got Pinot Gris. When we move into the reds, we've got some Zinfandel, Pinot Noir, your traditional Bordeaux, Cab, Malbec, Merlot, Petit Verdot, and Pinot Noir. So, yeah. Oh, and Syrah, one of my favorite wines. Yep, that's one of my favorite red to play around with.
So you have a smattering of wines, and then your wines are available on a national level as well as here in the winery or direct to consumer? Yeah,
so we have wholesale wines distributed all over, and we have direct to consumers, DTC wines that are on the property and through our club wines.
Okay. And so you've been here a long time, but if you can think back prior to being here and maybe even making wine, what is your first memory relevant to wine?
First memory relevant to wine. So if I go back to when I was very young, my father was a winemaker. Oh. And that's kind of how I stumbled into all of this. So we lived on a property at Lytton Springs Winery. And so my first kind of experience with wine was working in the vineyards. And I was doing disking, pruning, adding nutrients, and I kind of stumbled my way from there. I really loved driving tractors, so as a kid, that was a great thing to do, right? Uh-huh. And then it just kind of developed into, okay, now I need a job, so I like this, and I started working with my father and learning the cellar operations, press operations, and stuff like that. And then it was purchased by Ridge Vineyards, and I worked with them for a couple of years, and then I came over to Chalk Hill in the cellar.
So you have a very long memory. I mean, wine has been a part of your life since as far back as you can remember.
Yes, my father's in there. My brother was in the wine industry for a while. My uncle just recently retired from SEMI. He's been in there, so it's kind of been a family kind of thing. And Sonoma County is wine, and that's really what goes on in Sonoma County. So it was very easy for us as a family to get into the wine industry.
Wow. So is there a particular wine you remember tasting, and maybe it was recent, but one of those aha moment wines, whether it was a particular variety or maybe it was the experience? You're nodding, so what is that wine?
There is one. And it's not part of our organization, but a while back.
Fair enough.
Yeah, I went to Joseph Phelps and I tasted their Insignia, and I really loved how that wine was. It's a very smooth, rich, weighty wine, had a lot of aromatics to it, and it really caught my attention to what I'd like to do. At that time, I was kind of early in my cellar career and not really focused on a winemaking yet, but it gave me a direction like, I want to achieve something like this. I want to have this sort of direction.
So if we were to come to your home today, what would we find in there? What kind of wines do you have in your house?
Now that is mostly everything from our organization. So I do like Syrah, and that's in my house. I have that, some Cabernets. I do have a couple of Insignias that I pull out on special occasions. Beyond that, there's a Founders Chardonnay that I love that we produce that I have in the house as well.
And when you say from us, Chalk Hill is part of Foley Family Wines, so there's a lot of different brands in it. Are you including all the other brands, or are you a Chalk Hill aficionado lover?
So yes, you are correct. Chalk Hill,
loyalist.
yes, Chalk Hill is part of Foley Family Wines. So there's a broad array of different wineries, and there's over 30 wineries in our portfolio at this time. So mostly what I do stick to Chalk Hill wines.
Hey, if you like what you're making, I think that's a good sign. So do you think there's a such thing as a perfect variety? You're working with a lot of different grapes. You said you're a fan of Syrah.
Yeah.
Is perfection a possibility with a certain variety?
I don't know. I think it's a good question. I think it comes down to probably your personal preference or your perspective on what you think is a perfect variety and how you might want to craft it. And I think if you can achieve what you're trying to craft, I think that comes out to be perfection for yourself, in that regard. So
it's individual. You're not owning that.
Yes, yeah.
So let's see if I can get you to own something else. What's your opinion on wine critics and scores?
Yeah, those are tough. I mean, they're good to have those sources. It's good to have and see acknowledgement of how your wines are doing. I use it as a tool to see how I'm doing with the competitors, right? To see how we stand up with everyone else, and how can I start making the wines better. If the scores are kind of where we want them, there's always room to grow, right? So how do I adjust the wines to kind of improve those styles? So I think feedback from scores and critics, I think, is valuable information.
And so are you aspiring towards certain scores? That's what your aspiration is, or it's more to just improve upon the style you're liking?
I think it's a combination of both, right? Because scores obviously help get recognition. It helps get your wine moving if you need that extra help. So it's kind of staying true to our style, but improving on the scores if we need to. Mm-hmm. But we don't want to craft our wines just for scores. We want to, Chalk Hill has a certain style if we're talking about Chardonnay.
Well, let me ask you that. For someone who's never had Chalk Hill wines, what are they missing out on? What describe it.
Yeah,
you were just getting there.
Yeah, so that's where I was going. Chalk Hill wines are really known for the weight, richness, the creaminess of the mid palate. We're very focused on the texture of all the varietals. So we really want the wines to be weighty and rich, but not seem heavy at the same time. So a nice balance on some varietals. I'm looking for a balance between aromatic expression and weightiness and richness on the palate. But it always wants to be really, what I try to strive for is a soft, velvety texture. And I think that's what, as a whole, Chalk Hill wines have to offer. And I think it really shows that with whatever varietal you're working with, you can achieve that and make it more pleasing for people to have it with just as a glass alone or have it with food.
Well, speaking of food, how do you approach pairing food and wine? Do you look for certain things in the wine or certain things in the dish? Are there rules you follow? Are there hints you would suggest to others?
So that's an interesting question. So what my approach has been, I really kind of design the wine as a whole, what I would like to see the wine to be, but then I kind of work with our chef that we have on site, Alec, and have him kind of try to match what food works best with the wine. Mm-hmm. So I'm not trying to design the wine around food. I'm trying to design the wine around what I think are our consumer base, what people are going to like, whether it's food related or not. And then kind of have our more expert people, our chefs, kind of design what foods pair best with the wines, and then we have that experience here on the property.
And so that's on the property. What do you do in your home?
In my home, I'll have a Syrah with a nice steak. I think that works out well. Sauvignon Blanc, when I drink that, it's just more of a kind of relaxing spring kind of afternoon. Don't necessarily have it with food. It's more of a relaxing wine for me to drink. Uh-huh. So, yeah.
So if space aliens were to land on your property right now and you were to give them a bottle or a glass of Chalk Hill wine to say, this is Chalk Hill, which wine would it be?
Well, I'd have to lean towards my favorite. It's going to be on the Chardonnay, so it would be the Chardonnay, the Founder's Block.
Okay.
That block represents, I think, Chalk Hill very well. It is The vineyard block itself was planted in 1972, and we discovered early on after planting that there was something unique about that block because it has a very special clone. We were able to identify this was a particular clone, clone 97, and it's the only clone that that exists for, or we have the rights to that clone, and we're the only ones on who have the rights to it. So
Wow.
It's our own individual clone. We call it a Chalk Hill clone or clone 97. It is registered. It was identified by UC Davis and certified as its own clone. So it's nice to have that because our original block of Chardonnay actually kind of stumbled into its own clone. So that was great to have that. And we've been working with that clone for like 40 plus years now.
Wow. How did you get this clone? Or how do you know where it came from or
We don't actually know. At the time, Mark Lingenfelder was our vineyard manager at the time. And when he planted the block, he noticed within the block there was some variation in the grapes, and he thought, oh, maybe it's just they're just kind of getting established. But year after year, he kept seeing the same thing, which was loose clusters and very small berries, and we call it a shot berry clone because that's what it looks like. So once he discovered or thought that there was something different about that, that's when he had it taken in and identified.
And is that a mutation of some sort, or is that just a misplanting at some point?
We think it might be a slight mutation from the Winty clone, but we're not exactly sure.
Interesting. Okay, we'll get back to vineyard in a second, but as a wine drinker, red, white, or rosé?
I would say I'm more on the red side if you're picking those three.
If you had to pick.
If I had to pick, definitely I would go on the red side and I would lean towards the Syrah.
Still or sparkling? Still or sparkling?
Still. Yeah. Yeah. Not a sparkling fan. No. We do have some of that in the company, but it's not my particular taste.
Because you're a Syrah man.
I'm a Syrah man, yes.
And we have Syrah in our glass right now that we're sipping along as we talk. So going back to the vineyard and all the grapes you plant, and you've been here for a long time, Chalk Hill is a particular AVA. What sets Chalk Hill AVA apart from its neighbor? Well, you're a sub-AVA of Russian River, but from its neighbors.
Yeah. Well, yes, we are. Chalk Hill AVA is a small representation of, or a sub-AVA of Russian River. I think the uniqueness is that we have a lot of little microclimates in here, which that's why we're able to have the different varietals on the property. Mm-hmm. Across the street on one side, it might be warm and sunny. On the other side, you're going to have a little bit cooler area. And I think that happens in this very small EVA that you have this really different weather pattern. I call it the Chalk Hill bubble. I talk to people all the time about this, how this little section really, when we had a lot of the fires, we were kind of the last affected. Because we have the way the winds come in here, it blows things around the AVA. We don't get a lot of heavy moisture in the mornings, so we get nice even ripening. So we have a very nice weather pattern that happens through the AVA.
Wow. So in the time that you spend in the vineyard over the years, we know that there's vintage variation. We know every vintage tells a different story,
yes.
and the wine will reflect that. But I'm curious how much variation you see year to year. Do you see more commonality? Do you see big changes from one vintage to another, and how that reflects in the wine?
I would say more often than not, it's pretty linear. It's pretty common from vintage to vintage. There's slight variations. I don't think there's huge variations in most years. However, this last harvest, there was quite a bit of a change, and that was an extreme heat wave that we had, which really did affect our decision process and the quality of the fruit. So we had to kind of make adjustments as far as picking earlier, picking sooner, really looking at each varietal and seeing how the heat wave affected the grapes on the vine. But more often than not, you can expect a nice even ripening. You might get, like this year we have a lot of rain that came in, right? But so what that should do is push out the pick dates. It should be It should, but nature has a way of correcting itself.
Right.
Really.
So are there any signs or predictors you look for that will help you determine what a vintage will be?
We really watch the weather pattern as far as how much rain is coming in. And then when our heat days start and when bud break is going to start, which we should have within the next 2 weeks. So a little bit behind compared to the last couple of years.
But we've had a few atmospheric rivers.
Just a few, yes. More water here than what I remember, but which was well needed. But yes, this is the most amount of water or of rain I've seen come through here in quite a while.
So, do you have any good luck rituals at the start of harvest for yourself personally, or maybe for the team?
For the team, we do what we call a harvest blessing. So the first day of harvest, as the grapes come in, we try to get all the departments that are on the location here out involved. We do a little kind of a speech about what our expectations are, what we're hoping for. We usually taste the previous vintage. So if we're taking in, usually it's going to be Pinot Gris that arrives first. So we'll have a bottle of the previous vintage of Pinot Gris. We'll all taste that, and then we'll pour our leftover glass into the first bin that's going to go into the press. So that's kind of our tradition that we do here.
I like that. So obviously, just before you spend a lot of time in the vineyards, I just had the pleasure of traveling around the vineyards, not by foot, but by Hummer. But got to see all the beauty of these vineyards. And I'm wondering how intimately involved you are with your grapes. Like, do you walk the vines? Do you talk to them? Is there sort of a relationship from one vineyard to the next that you have to encourage some and yell at others?
Yeah. That's a good one. I do walk the vineyards, especially once we start, probably a month out from when we're anticipating picking. I will walk out in the vineyards. I walk every block, taste them, kind of see how they're doing, and kind of get a feel for what's out there, what the conditions look like. And as far as talking to them, I don't know if I verbally out loud talk to them, but definitely in my head I'm like, okay, I'm hoping you will get ripe, and I'm hoping that you're gonna by the time I want to pick. So there is definitely that. You definitely want a good relationship with your vineyard.
Yeah. And then once the grapes come in and they go into barrel, do you build that same sort of communication with the wine?
Yeah.
Please finish fermenting.
Yes. Fingers crossed, everything finishes. We take some risk with our winemaking here. So there is when we do our Chardonnay, it's 100% native fermentation, and it's 100% barrel fermented. So it requires a lot of going down and talking to the barrels. I encourage our interns who do our sampling during harvest and singing to the barrels, make sure they're happy. Make sure the environment is good for them. Yeah, we really want to encourage fermentation and finish.
Wow. So you said that you wanted to be, you've been in the wine world since childhood. Mm-hmm. From a very early age, did you know you wanted to be a winemaker?
Oh, no. I definitely wanted to play sports when I was younger. It was so I went from wanting to play sports being young, and then when I graduated high school and I went to college, I was actually going to college for computer programming. But I was still working in the wine industry. And so as I kind of developed, I'm like, okay, do I want to go this way or that route? And I just felt a better connection to the wine industry. I felt I had something that I could build off of, and I really felt comfortable with that. So I kind of took some time off from school. I was thinking, well, I'll take a semester or a year off and kind of see how it goes. And I stayed in the wine industry and never went back to school.
And you were saying that you were into sports. Any particular sports?
Oh, I loved football. I played football for, and this is, through high school. I played from when I was probably 7 to when I graduated, and then I did coach for 5 years on Redwood Powell organization, and then a little bit for the JC.
Wow. And who's your team?
My team is 49ers. That is my favorite team, yes. Has been since as far as I can remember. More of a connection between my father and I love to watch football together. So that was his favorite team, and I loved watching Joe Montana play, and I got hooked after that. So
if the 49ers were to be in the Super Bowl next year and won, which of your wines would you want to give to them?
It's good. I would probably give them our William P. Foley, our red wine, a red Bordeaux blend. It's a very nice blend of Cabernet, Malbec, and Petit Verdot. I think it's a very strong presence wine. It's got a lot of depth and character to it, so I think it would match a Super Bowl worthy team.
So when you're not working, how do you like to spend your free time?
My free time is a little bit of golf, and I like to work on cars. I used to have a Mustang way back, and I used to I was working on rebuilding that, so I
What year?
got my hands in. I had a 65 fastback. So yes, working on trying to get one back. So someday that's my goal.
So growing up in the wine industry with a father that worked in wine, your uncle worked in wine, your brother, we get advice from a lot of different people. Is there a piece of advice one of them gave you, or maybe it was someone else that along the way is something you've chosen to use in your work or in your life that kind of guides you?
I'd say my dad probably just said, he gave me some freedom to try different things in the wine industry when he was a winemaker. So I got to see different aspects of how the wine worked. And his advice was just really, hey, you don't know what you want to do, try something until either you like that direction you're going, or hey, this isn't my direction, I want to go somewhere else, and do something else. I think just having a slight bit of advice, but not being like told what to do. It's just like, here's an option. Explore it, see if it works for you, and if it does, great. If it doesn't, then explore another option. But I think mainly for my father, that would be what I would say. And it's funny because I told my son the same thing. He told me when he was young, I used to bring him out here and bring him on a forklift and kind of have him go around. And he told me when he got older, he said, I'll never work in the wine industry, and he currently works for us. So,
what does he do?
He works in the cellar. He's a cellar, a cellar guy. So yeah.
Never say never.
Yep, that is true. That's what I tell him.
So when you look back at your career, what would you say is one of your proudest achievements to date?
I think looking at that, I would say how long I've been here, how many different winemakers I've worked with, and what I've learned, experience I've gained by working with 7 different winemakers, and then kind of taking pieces from them and developing my own style. And then being recognized for the work that I do and being promoted to winemaker, I think was a very, very high achievement for me, because as I started at Chalk Hill, I was a cellar hand, and I worked my way through 5 or 6 different positions to get here, and I feel very proud to be a Chalk Hill winemaker.
That's awesome. So we're sitting here at a table, and a bottle of your wine's on the table and an empty seat next to you. Who from any walk of life, living or deceased, would you want to share a bottle of Chalk Hill wine with?
Oh, that's didn't think about that, but
Joe Montana.
Yeah, actually, that's where I was going with it. If I had an opportunity to meet him, because I know he kind of is in this area. If I had an opportunity to meet him and have him sit down, I think that would be the best thing that I could ever think of. Just to be able to kind of have that little experience with a childhood memory. I saw him doing his best at his best, his best occupation, and kind of showing him what my best occupation is.
I love that. So complete the sentence for me. A table without wine is like?
That one's a little tough. Is a table like just not ready to be sat down at? It's not prepared. Yeah.
See? Thought-provoking. You're making me think. We got it. So, Darrel, I didn't warn you about this, but we play a little game.
Okay.
This is a great way to kind of understand your wines a little more. You've done a great job describing the Founder's Reserve and the Chardonnay, the 2 wines you give the aliens and the 49ers. But, a lot of times as wine conjures an emotion in us, so does music. And so You did say you make your interns sing to your wine. I'm not going to make you sing, I promise. But I want you to pair wine with music. Now, you can do a genre. You can give me a specific musician. You can give me a specific song. You can give me a particular album, whatever comes to mind.
Yeah.
But I wanted to start with your estate Chardonnay. So maybe describe that wine, and then you can tell us how you came up with this music.
Okay. So our estate Chardonnay, like I mentioned before, is barrel fermented, and it's native fermentation. So basically, we're taking the natural characteristics from the vineyard and let them express themselves. The estate Chardonnay is a very round, rich, dense wine with a lot of layers to it. It'll be soft on the palate, a smooth entry. It'll have nice apple pie, baked pear, baked bread, kind of aromatics to it, and a nice kind of long, juicy finish to it. So with that, I'm a country music fan, so that's my genre. kind of more in the 80s, early 90s. So at George Strait, Brooks and Dunn, a few others, Patty Loveless. So I think those, for me, if I'm sitting at home and just listening to some music, I'll have that on the background. I'd be having some of our wines with that.
Okay. And what about your Sauvignon Blanc?
Sauvignon Blanc is a little bit more energetic because it's more lively on the palate. There's more acidity. It's got a nice tartness to it. Lemon, lime, grapefruit is very present in there. So when I think of that, when I did go to a Brooks and Dunn concert, they're very lively, energetic in their time, and I would associate that in their time. I would associate the Sauvignon Blanc to that.
Okay. And then your Founder's Reserve.
Founder's Reserve. Oh, I'm not sure where I would pair that with. That's interesting. I'd still stay in the country area because it's got the Founders is kind of our top tier. It's over the top. It's big. It's rich. It's 100% new oak fermented. So it's going to be big, round, bold. It's going to have a lot of oak in there. But very balanced at the same time as far as not being too oak dominant. It's going to be round and rich as it goes through the palate. Very much lower on the acidity, but I'm not sure where I would put that as far as music. That would take. I'd still be in the country side of things, but I'm not sure if it would be earlier or later.
Okay, I won't put much pressure, but I got one more. Okay. Your beloved Syrah, which we have in the glass here.
Syrah, yes. Another rich, bold wine. Has a lot of interesting flavors, and I've just always been drawn to it. I would probably say it's more, to me, kind of like Patty Loveless. I like her music, and I could see myself sitting there drinking that wine and enjoying her music.
Well, there you go. Okay, Darrel, I got one final question for you. You live in this beautiful place. You work in a gorgeous setting. No reason really to leave it, but what wine region in the world is at the top of your bucket list to go explore?
I would really like to go to France and just visit, not anything in particular. I'd like to visit the region. I haven't had the opportunity. I had a brief opportunity last year, and I'm hoping to get that opportunity this year. But France is somewhere where I really like to explore what they have, or learn a little bit about the whole history, and see actually what they've been doing there. Just because I hear everyone talk about it, and just kind of the lore of being there, right? Mm-hmm. That's what I'd really like to do at some point.
Well, I think you should start planning. It's not that far away. It's just a 9-hour flight. But that's a great destination. For someone who has a destination of coming here to Sonoma, how can they find you? Where can they find you? What can they do as an experience with Chalk Hill?
So there's lots. So you can find us on we have a website, Chalk Hill, or Foley Family Wines. We'll show all of our different sites and how to get there and how to make reservations. We can come here to Chalk Hill and make reservations, and you can do a chicken and caviar setting with some of our wines, which is really nice. You can do the Hummer tour, which you had done, just a tasting in a taste room, and look out to the beautiful site that we have right outside the taste room. So, just call in is a good way. So, but most people go through the website.
Wonderful. So you're just a few minutes away from the town of Healdsburg. So an easy trip, beautiful view. Head to Chalk Hill Winery, which is in the Chalk Hill AVA. Yes. Darrel, thank you so much for joining us on Wine Soundtrack, and I hope you had fun.
Great, thank you. I enjoyed it very much.
I'll give you a little cheers.
All right, there you go.
Thanks for listening to a new episode of Wine Soundtrack USA. For details and updates, visit our website, winesoundtrack.com.